time to install the cutter head. At this time, this is where you will be using your protective device. It helps it to where you've got a place to kind of rest your cutter head on there so you don't damage the bellows. You want to be very careful with that. That's why we've provided you with really kind of a protection. If you puncture the bellows with your cutter head, it's gonna leak. It's gonna leak all your coolant in there. So you don't want to do that. So use this. That way, when you, depending on how heavy your cutter head is, you've got a place to kind of set it up here. Since we're going to be grinding on this face, we'll be installing it with this side in. So with your high pressure grease gun, you know, if you go to 150 bar, you'll be fine. It's not going anywhere here. We'll lock our hydrolock. Make sure that's tight. Turn around. After you lock down, you'll go ahead and use about half the pressure that you normally would. You don't need to pressurize this up like you'd normally put on your finger jointer, arbors, or planers. You don't need to go all that. So if you just go about half, it'll hold on. Your hydrolock will hold on to that. And then you'll go ahead and test it. It's no longer sliding, so we've got our hydrolock pressurized. Now the machine, if it does slip and you don't get this tight all the way, the machine will recognize that it is slipping, and it'll actually stop you from grinding. So if with this automatic grinder, typically what a lot of people do is once you get it all set up, you can go ahead and run this machine and you can leave and go do something else. If at any time you lost your pressure, the machine is automatically going to sense that and shut it down. So right now we've got the hydrolock's tight, so we can proceed to go ahead and set up our probe. All right, so we're going to go over setting up the positioning for your grinder head for a grind. If you look back, the easiest way to kind of tell is if you're standing directly behind the grinder and you look down this way, you're going to want your knife to be almost as vertical as you can get it. And what I mean by vertical is your actual face right here. So you wouldn't want it to be leaned this way or back that way. So you're going to want it as perpendicular as best as you can get it. And we'll know when we're going to take a Sharpie marker and go ahead and just mark the face of your knife. So when we do start grinding, you'll notice if the Sharpie marker is gone on top or on the bottom. You're going to want it to be even, so you'll want it to go directly across and remove it on neither the top part or the back part. So if you're straight up and down, you'll have a nice clean grind on this. How you adjust that, if you are too far forward or too far backwards, grab your 9/16 inch wrench, loosen your bolts, which these are loose, and you can rotate it a little bit more. Now where I'm set, and that'll be to adjust your probe assembly, you've got socket head screws on the back side. You also have got a spring in here in your probe. Now, I'm going to go ahead and kind of put it in a neutral position so you can kind of see what I'm about to show you. So we have pressure. Now you're going to be able to get spring pressure on either direction with this. Right now we have our spring pressure going down because of the way that our orientation is with the head. Again, as you can kind of cycle through. Now if you was to go the other side, your spring pressure would actually need to be the opposite way. So I'm going to show you that on adjusting your spring pressure. The set screw on the back, when you loosen this, and you will need to have some counter torque, and just grab a crisp wrench. Now if you loosen the spring, now there's no pressure on it. As you can see that. So what you'll do is if you're, because we're going this direction, we want the spring pressure going down that direction, because as it rotates, it's going to flip through there. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to do this, get some counter torque, and you'll have to pull it just slightly with your wrench. You pick up on it a little bit, kind of hold that in place, and then you're going to tighten your Allen screw. Now, right now I got it kind of tight, so I can kind of show you what really not to do. There's a lot of pressure on that. What that is eventually going to do is going to cause a lot of tension on your spring. The spring in here, this is your extra one. But after a while, with this much pressure, for one, it's rolling over your knives that you just got through sharpening, and it can fatigue. It's added stress, unwanted stress on there. So you just break this loose. We'll go to no pressure. It's just go in small increments. So it's really located on where this wrench is actually located on here. So the more that you're pulling it, since we're going this way, I'm pulling it up, locking this down, and now we've got a perfect amount of pressure on there. Should be easy to take one finger and kind of move it, and also it's not going to come down and slam down. So that's a good pressure. You're going to extend the life of your spring a lot longer. In your, obviously you don't want to be rolling over that tip, because as it does come forward, you'll notice that it still does got to go over the front of your knife, and then it'll go back and stop. Now with all this is servo driven, so you actually, when you're running this, you're going to have an actual torque on this, and it's going to be identical. It will roll forward, it will go back, and then that torque is going to be equal. If you notice, it does flex slightly, but there's going to be a set amount of torque on that, and what it's going to do is it's going to be identical every single time. So when you do set your knife up where we're at right here, you want to make sure that you're up against that probe. You obviously don't want it like this. You don't want it kind of loose. You need it to go back, a little bit of pressure. You go forward, and I would take the hand control if you're going forward, and just move back until it stops, and then just give it 10 pulses on that, and then go off of this. This is where you're going to go off of on your. Let's go back to our sharpening mark. Yes, the servo on here, we've got a gearbox. It's got a 71 gearbox. This is your Y. This servo motor is actually what is driving the cutter head to rotate. So what it's going to do is there's a torque limit that's set on this servo motor. So as you go back, it's resting on there on a fixed torque. This has got a fixed torque on it in either direction. It'll go forward, but coming back on this, it will have a torque limit set up there. So it's going to be identical every single time. That way you're not going to have variance on different knives, because if it wasn't like that, then you wouldn't you would have differences on grinding on each of the knives. So they will be identical on every one of them. Now if you notice, I come forward and then you know I'm stopping. Now if you just sat there and rotated this over and over again, the servo motor it will trip. You'll have to hit the e-stop and reset that, because there's a position error on there. So just go back and give yourself another 10 pulses, just back. And that's where I would go to start your setup. And if you would like, you can go through and you can mark up every single one of these faces, just in case. This is another thing is if you're marking all these, you can kind of see what's going on with them. They're going to be, if you'd hit this one right here, you grind all that Sharpie off, but then all of a sudden you come over here, maybe on the other side, and you still have a Sharpie mark on there, then something's wrong. Either your setup stand has got an issue. You could have something with the head, maybe elongated or something like that. So it also kind of helps you do a little bit of troubleshooting also, because with this setup here, they're going to be identical. To set your angle, again, you're gonna take this probe, and that as we're sitting here, we're putting that probe almost like a T. So we're going where it's resting right now. If you actually drew, if I drew like a cross on there, you would go straight down to the front, and then you'd be at a 90 on there. That's how we want to set this probe up. If you don't maintain that angle and you come in at an angle that's off, you're gonna have problems. You're gonna have issues, because the force, it'll slide and it will not allow you to be lined up properly. So this is the proper way to set it up. All of those adjustments are right here on the 2 socket heads. This will spin you. So you just want it to be So once you have everything kind of locked down, get everything nice and snug. You don't want this moving on you when you're operating. So you need to, after you grind, you shouldn't have to move this. That's really not going to be where your adjustment is. On your hook angle, where you're adjusting this angle, is going to be these 2 9/16 bolts right here. This is going to rotate. So even if you wanted to, you could set way out here into the front and set it up this way. Then you'll just rotate, and then this is where your adjustment is going to be right here. That's gonna make you either lean too far forward or too far backward. Those adjustments are right here. Once you get it nice and vertical, then you're set up properly. So we'll go through. Make sure everything's tight. But one of the biggest problems is if you don't get any, if everything is not tight on here, it'll slowly move on you during operation, and then you'll have issues, because you'll be good on the setup, and then it'll slowly drift and move on you. So just make sure that everything is nice and good and tight. Now, where we've kind of set up, the machine does have also an e-stop up here. So this is just one that's gonna, you just push down, you could hear that went off. You're gonna rotate this to take the e-stop out. But you're in run mode now, but you will have to pull that e-stop in the 3rd position on the HMI over there. You can't reset that with this hand control. This is just an emergency stop up here. So if you do have problems and you're on the e-stop screen, just double check this, because this sometimes gets overlooked. So reset it. And we will go back into the jog menu. And we are grinding on this side again. And this is just easier for me to demonstrate this to you, because you can visually see the face of it, so it's a little bit easier to see this. So how you really set this up, we could get this out of the way, you could leave it in. Just all depends on your preference, but it can stay in there. Typically on most of these, when you're doing a setup, down, and you're going to get it pretty close. And what you will be doing is when you're going to take this has got your lead, so this will be making contact with the knife first. So you will hand rotate it until you can hear it make contact with the CBN wheel to your finger joint knife. Now this has got this particular CBN wheel has got a nice round edge, which is perfect to keep your gullet. You never want to have a sharp angle, especially with finger joining. You never want to have a sharp angle here. It doesn't clear out your material on your finger joint on your head. So keep this angle in here. That'll keep you nice and round. And always double check with your hook gauge. So if you got ace knives or whatever you have, there's a tool that you can look to make sure that you keep this hook angle the same. Now, if you want to keep grinding, we're going to be going in and grinding and removing the material. You can go to roughly about 25 thousandths of material to remove off of here before you have to repost. So you change it slightly, your hook angle, when you're coming in, but just keep that in mind. It's what the ACE recommends is 25 thousandths. So sometimes it's easy to get back and kind of take a look at it, then you can see when you're getting relatively close. We want to get it as close as we can by hand without any pressure on it. So take your hand control and kind of set it on there, and with your right hand, you're going to slowly rotate this.
And you're in the 1X on your...
I'm actually on 10 to speed it up just for demonstration purposes. We're going to go on here just so, because it creeps extremely slow on 1. But as you rotate this, you'll hear it kind of, yep, see, there it goes. So just making contact. Now, this is a brand new CBN wheel. If you can notice, there's a high spot in there. These things take a little bit to break in. So this is new equipment right here. So, but right there is where this is where you would say, okay, go ahead, I'm good right there. Making contact. You can go down a little bit more on this. So now now that we know that we're just slightly touching, making contact with the knife, we can go ahead and pull it back. Now, what you want to do here is, this is probably a good spot right here to where you would go ahead and run. You don't want to stop in the middle of the grinding wheel on your knife. So we're going to actually clear all the way through it. So give yourself an inch or so in front, and we're going to pass it an inch or so in the back. So you could just get a tape measure and just remember on how far you need to go. So from this point to pass this point, it looks like we would probably be going up 8 inches would be fine. And we've got to remember that because we will program that in there. Depending on what you have, how big of a stack you're doing or whatever, that number is going to change depending on there. And we'll go into that in the programming aspect of that. And you can almost see I came through right on the tip. I have Sharpie mark. It took it off the tip. So that actually means that this head I've got too far forward. If it's too far back, so I have to loosen these up and fold that back a little bit. We're gonna rotate, and we call this the banjo. This is really piloted in, and it will rotate. Again, it's a little tedious to set this stuff up, but once you have it set up, there should never be a need to move this. Once you've really got it set, right or left, it doesn't matter, because your number one station, number 2 station, you're just gonna orientate different. You'll just slide your other head the opposite way. So once this is set, you really shouldn't be needing to move that anymore. Now, if you know, I probably wind up being quite a bit further away because of changing that backwards. So we will now be creating a cycle for the grinder. Now this particular grinder, we can store up to 10 different programs, which is your head. So with this head that we have on here right now, this is a 10 bolt head. If you remember back when we used our tape measure to measure the distance of travel, we had 8 inches. So right now your screen should look like this, because everything up to this point we've been in the jog screen. We know where we're at. We also hand rotated it, so we're lined up properly and ready to grind. So what you're going to do is now that we've backed ourselves off, you're going to give yourself that 1.5 inches. So go ahead and 0 your controls. That's going to give you a reference of 0 where you're at. This is where we want to start our grind. So you'll go back to the main menu. This is where you're going to go to create your grind cycle to make your own. So this is the actual program number, and like I say, you have 1 through 10. So we'll pick 1. So this will be cycle 1. Sometimes you may want to grind a little bit more off or less off, or maybe you have new knives, or this gives you the versatility of being able to jump through and save programs. Also maybe you just need some down feed or whatever, you would be able to create that as well. So this is the number of knives in our head. We have a stack of 10 bolt head, so we'll choose 10. With passes per knife, what it's going to happen is the x-axis is going to go in and out. And this right here, that's 1 pass. Then it will rotate to the next knife and go in and out. So this, we will just pick 1. And this is going to be how much material you want to remove total overall. So we'll take off, we'll say we'll do 4 thousandths. Okay, if you notice the screen, it comes up red, incremental in feed not set. So right here is where you want to grind in feed per pass. So we're going to take 4 thousandths off total, but let's say we only want to do 1,000th each time. So this is what it's going to take off, 1,000th each time. You'll notice it cleared that fault. So this is going to rotate. It will hit every knife on there. It will index in 1,000th, grind all the way around all 10 knives. Then it will come in another 1,000th and do it, so on and so forth. But it will go 4 revolutions complete at 1,000th each time. Here's your in-feed wheel wear. We don't really have wear on a CBN wheel anymore. That is really kind of for your aluminum oxide wheels of that. So for our CBN wheel, that is going to stay at 0. Now on the next page, this is how many spark outs you'd like to do. Your spark outs are not in-feeding in. It's not a grind cycle. You're actually kind of polishing it or finishing it off. So what it does is it will go through and take every single knife and just brush it again. But it does not index. It does not remove material. It's more to just kind of polish it and shine it up. So that's an option if you, especially with finger jointing. A lot of times you've got to have a really nice joint on cabinetry and things like that, where you would utilize that feature on there. This is where your down feed comes into play. So as you grind in, you're removing material, but what happens is your gullet starts to raise because you're chasing it in. Now if you're posting it every time or something, it won't affect you. But right here with the down feed wheel wear, this also allows you to be able to do down feed too. So not just your in feed that's coming in on the X axis or on the Z axis, but when it's coming down also, that's W. So you're going to use this too. So if we say that we want it to go down, say 3 thousandths. And see what it will do is it will automatically, because we know that back here we have 4 revolutions, 1,000th each one, that's 4. And so what it's doing is taking that 3,000 and it's getting that 4 in there. So we're going to have 4 revolutions, and so it'll automatically fill that out for you. And again, that's the down feed wheel wear, which we have none on a CBN wheel. So as you're standing at the grinder, when this is talking about left and right, it's as you're standing at this screen. So you're standing at this control station, your left is going to be your left and the right is going to be right, addressing the grinder. Now when we measured that, we measured 8 inches. So we'll plug that in there. That's how long, that's how far that your grinding motion is. That's your traverse distance. You also we're grinding left, so that is actually correct, but just so I can show you, it will do right or left, and that's how you're looking at the machine. So we are grinding to the left, and this is your travel speed on how fast you would like the carriage to move. Now when you're looking at finger joint knives, this kind of really varies. You'll have to look at kind of like grit and things. If you're using a really fine grit, your travel speed is going to be quite a bit less. Typically on a generic finger joint knives, if you're using an 80 grit CBN wheel, you're looking at probably 2.5 to 3 inches per second. Any slower and you wind up loading your wheel, and we'll go over cleaning the wheel also. I would recommend cleaning this wheel after every grind. When this head is sharp, when it's ready to go on your finger jointer, I would go ahead and clean that CBN wheel. So after we've added this travel speed, this is a cooling pause. Typically that right there is going to be for your planer heads and stuff like that. You shouldn't need too much of a cooling pause on finger joint knives. They're not going to overheat that much. But this gives you option when this travels. It will go forward, it will wait. This is where you adjust that. You could have that set up to 10 seconds, and then it will come back to its home position. So we will just leave that be right now, and right here is where we will save that program. So that is saved. Now I want to go back to show you that it did save. So you will go into here, you'll let's say we just to show that we have nothing in the other program. So when we go back to 1, that's what we saved our program, is at 1. When we load this up, we'll hit load and it will populate everything that we put in there. So that program is saved in there. So again, you can have up to 10 programs of different varieties of different things that you would want. Now that that's completed, you can hit your continue. And then when you hit the grind button, it's going to rotate the head. Now what that's doing right there is it is checking torque. So if this is like when you don't have grease in there, or the switch isn't working, or you set the probe up wrong, this is going to detect it right away. This is where you're going to get it. And I'm going to show you that again. We'll go back. You don't have to always go into setup. You can actually go into the cutterhead grind menu button. This will take you in there. Always remember if you're changing it, make sure you get the right one in there. So we'll show you again. Go into 4 and you load. You can see that's not populating. Now once we go to 1, that's what our program will save. It will load that. Don't forget to load it, and you'll see this is what it's going to do. This is just a mental check to just look at everything and make sure it all looks good. It gives you an overview of what you're about to do. Now this is going to grind, and it will take 4 thousandths total off of this. So just be careful. It gives you another chance to look at this. Don't wind up putting 0.04 in there or something like that. Just make sure your numbers are good. It's loaded in there. If all that looks good, then you'll hit the grind button and you will notice it will rotate. Again, it's checking for the torque on there to make sure that your setup is right. So everything that you've done up to this point, it's just double checking to make sure it's correct. And we can also check it. You want to go ahead and let's say you want to start up. Let's say we come in. We want to start. This is a 10-bolt head, but let's say, hey, we want number 1s over here. You're like, well, I want this one to be set up. This is where I want to start. So for any reason, you can go through and you can check all these as well by this button that says rotate cutter head. So you'll actually set up to wherever you would like to do, and you can check all your heads, making sure that everything looks good, making sure it operates. And so this is my number 1, and this is where I want to start out. So if you go into your grinder head menu, and we are on number 1, you'll look to double check all your numbers. When you hit grind, it will do that test. Check in there. Right here, when you are starting your grinder, you're going to be running your wheel on and your pump on. So when you get these started, then it will allow you to go into and run your grinder. Now what I want to do is when we got it all set up, we've already gone through the rotate cutter head button. You want to check with a test pass. Now test pass is going to check and verify your setup. So we will run a test pass. You can see we're stuck in it, and that's good. So that's a good amount. It's not hitting too hard. So be careful when you go in there to jog it at the original setup, as I showed you. When you move into that, don't push too hard. As you're slowly rotating that wheel, you just want to be grazing it. Don't get it to where it's so tight on there, because you will hit your knife fairly hard. So we can go through and rotate. Next time we could do another test pass. And you can tell without any noise right there, those are different. on there. So these are different. They would need to be ground down. But you can tell the other one didn't make any noise. That means that this is the other one was a little bit higher than this one. And this is what I mean, where it's going to make your knives identical. At this instance, we're using 10-bolt head. And we'll make them all the exact same height. We've got probably a post issue or something on this particular head here. But what you want to, when you're done, you're going to want to make sure that you hear that make contact on every single one of those knives. When you're done grinding, you'll be able to see your edges, full square edges on the edge. That means that you're sharp. Most time you'll know when you're good is there'll be a tiny burr right on the tip of your cutter heads on your knives. When you get that burr on every single one of your knives, you'll be able to put it on the finger jointer, store it. But that will be done. After that's completed and you get one sharp, you'll pull that head off and use your cleaning stick to clean that wheel. I recommend doing it after every single time that you're gonna grind. Especially this 10-bolt head, you're gonna have a lot of that material. Depending on how much you got to grind off, you're gonna want to take this and just do a good cleaning on it. It also keeps you consistent when you bring your other head on. So if you did station 1, use a cleaning stick on it, take it off, get it stored, use a cleaning stick on it, and then you can put your number 2 side on again and clean that after you're done with that. Do that again. I'll illustrate that again. I'll rotate it. We'll do a test pass. What you can also see is it's moving exactly what we wanted. We're going past the CVN wheel, and then we're coming back and passing the CVN wheel. But you Jeff, that's what that 8 inches is for. You don't want to make it to where you stop in the middle of it, and then it will just drag on your knives. They will get hot doing that. So don't do that. Rotate it again. Test pass and check this. So if these knives got a little bit of varying, when I hit this cycle, it will run automatically into a cycle and make all those knives the same. So I will demonstrate actually running a cycle with your pump on and your wheel on. Go ahead and hit the start grind button. as you can see, it will automatically shut down. This is a pretty handy tool for a countdown, so you know when to come back. You would eventually know how long your grind cycle is going to take. So this is just a small example. Typically, if you're grinding them, they're probably right around about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, typically on your cycle. But depending on whatever you do, this time is going to be varied. But we know right now that cycle right there was 9 minutes. So even if you was to take lunch or something or whatever, you'd know how long your cycle is to get the other set of heads on there. So one of the features with this, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and start this up again. Go ahead and stick with the same program that we made. We'll turn the wheel on and the pump on. And we're going to go and start the grind cycle. Now, what I'm going to show you is a line stop. This is going to go in and come out. What I want to show you is this line stop. If you depress this, it's going to kind of push pause on the cycle. So if you're down at a few knives or whatever, this is a handy tool to hit line stop, so you don't have to start the entire cycle all over again. In this mode right here in the line stop, you can come over here and then you can go to your Z axis and you can actually add in a little bit more. So I can index in and take a little bit more material off. So if you didn't have it set up perfectly, and maybe you're a little bit further away and you're not hitting any knives, you can hit a line stop and then you can go in there. And then it'll actually allow you to adjust that in this line stop mode. So if I wanted to add it, and right here on the screen you can see your wheel in feed. Now if you watch, if I go into the creep mode, you'll actually see those numbers change. So actually I advanced a little bit on that. And now you'll just take this off and you will hit continue. And you can see I kind of moved in a little bit there. So as you can tell, after adjusted that line stop, you can hear that I did advance that, so we are hitting a lot harder. But it allows you to go in the middle of a cycle and push pause and pause that cycle out. So it's another little handy trick, but that's what this line stop would be for. Even if you need to get in there and you looked at maybe something was in there, you can hit the line stop. It does stop the cooling pump, so you can open the door so you don't have to worry about getting wet or making a mess. And simply pull back up on the line stop, hit continue, and it will start off where it left off. Now as far as like your safety, I'll wait until this goes through and I'll demonstrate your e-stop. I'll wait till it comes up through here. Okay, so this right here is an emergency stop. So something happens, you've had an e-stop here, you have also an emergency stop on the control console right here. That way gives you the option, if you're way back over there with your hand control, something happens, you've got an e-stop right here on the hand control. Just remember that you'll have to twist it. You'll have to twist it to reset it. You'll have to come over here, and this is your master. This will start you up again. And then you'll hit continue. And we're back to the screen. And you'll just go back in there and make new cycles or whatever you need to do. It's not too complicated. You're really just going to be kind of setting it up, but for the most part, once you have all this set up, you'll just be going into the grinder head and running a cycle. So now the next cutter head that's on here, we don't have to go back and we don't have to make all those adjustments and tighten all that stuff down and change that. When this is sharp, we could take it off and we can take our other cutter header from the other side, flip it, and put it on there without ever having to mess with that setup again. So if nothing moves and everything was tightened down and you're only going to do finger joint knives, you won't have to mess with that setup anymore. Just don't forget to post after you remove 25 thousandths off of there. But on this one we were taking 4 thousandths off, so it does give you the option. A lot of people they'll just go through and they'll repost after you pull them off, but just repost and then grind them, because the chances of you kind of messing it up a little bit right now when they're ground, they're all going to be identical, because you heard how some of them were striking and some of them weren't. It's going to make them all the same. So there's less chance if you post everything and get it right. When you grind them, they're all going to be equal.
So post first, grind second.
Yes. And don't forget your cleaning stick. Don't forget to utilize this. I would recommend every time. And big points to remember is that whey oil. If you don't keep this oiled, I think it's like the viscosity is it's like a 68 or something. But you run the risk of this rusting, and that you're going to bind in there. So please keep that clean and keep it oiled. It's going to save you a lot of heartache later. You'll find NSK grease and a grease gun in your toolkit. We offered a flexible hose, which I recommend not using the hard one. It's almost virtually impossible to grease your linear bearings. So the first thing you will do is you'll take your flexible hose and go right in through the slot, and you'll screw it down. This makes it much easier when you're greasing your bearings. So it comes in a accordion style shaped tube. You don't need a lot of grease. Really what we're doing is we're not really greasing the bearings as much as we're trying to keep them clean. So as high-speed steel starts to migrate in there, this will flush it out. So you don't need a whole bunch. This should last you a very long time, both of these tubes. I have to unscrew this. You'll take the tab off. This one actually just came off. Sometimes there's a sticker on here. You sometimes have to peel those off, and then you'll just get it tight. Put your cover back on. Now, usually at the very beginning, there's going to be air in this, so you'll have to kind of prime it, help it a little bit by just taking your thumb and press in there as you're pumping, until you finally you can kind of start to feel the resistance, and now you'll see your grease coming out. Now I'll show you where we grease your linear bearings. So the linear rails and bearings that you have, they have 4 bearings on this carriage. You've got 2 in the front and 2 in the back. These are where we're concerned about, is keeping these clean. So as we add grease to them, it will push out any fine material or dust, any fine dust that can get inside and migrate inside the bearing. So you'll get this right here. Put it on, and you only need maybe like a little half a squirt. You don't need a lot. Again, you're not really kind of greasing them. You're just keeping them clean. And then you just kind of hit these. Now you're going to want to do this depending on how frequently you are grinding. If you're grinding, I would say 4 heads per day, you're probably going to want to do this maybe once a week, and just get about half a squirt in there, and it'll make your bearings last much longer to keeping them clean. Once you get high-speed steel and everything in there, it really starts to open it up, and then you get a lot more play in there. That's going to affect your grind significantly. When it's brand new like this, there's absolutely no play in it. You have under 1,000th play which there's none in there. It's under 1,000. But over time, if you don't grease these, this will start to kind of wobble on you, and as you're grinding, it can push you off, and it'll start to affect your grind. So this is one of the big things. We just stress to use this when you put this on your periodicity for weekly. Unless you're doing a really heavy grinding, multiple heads per day, you're going to probably have to do that a little bit more frequently. So as we go through, this is a kind of a daily thing. You can check this. This is what I spoke of earlier, is you can come in here, you can clean down the machine. As you can tell, just that little bit of grinding that we did, we've already got material in there. Now this is material that you ground off on the cutter heads. This is the stuff that can wind up in your bearings if you don't grease it. So it's natural, it's just going to be in here. So you'll give it a once-a wipe down. As I said before, you can see just that little bit of grinding. You can already see on the magnet how it's removing that material. And so this is something that you will wipe off and clean this daily. Or you might have to wipe it off every three heads, but it takes no time. It's very quick and easy. Keep that wipe down. And this doesn't really make any difference if you go this direction or this direction. It doesn't matter. But you can see how it is working. So, and you'll put that back in there. After you've checked your bearings, you get those greases, you clean everything. This is one of really a big ticket maintenance item that needs to be done. Here I have my whey oil. If you just do a couple squirts on this, right on these dovetails, and just get a little bit on there. What this is going to do is it's going to prevent rust, and it's going to keep you nice and lubricated. But these will rust. This is all cast, so you've got to keep it lubricated. It will keep everything nice and clean. So probably once you'll have to just keep an eye on it and look at it, but sometimes you'll just need to take some Scotch pads and just clean. If this dries or you start to see rusting or any corrosion or anything like that, just get a little bit of Scotch-Brite pad. Pay attention to the inside right here, because most of all your grinding is going to be in here, so a lot of your materials are going to wind up here. That's why this is great, because it kind of prevents a lot of that stuff from getting introduced in there. So keep this in good condition. If it ever tears, you need to keep that on there. Don't take this off. And then so we'll lubricate all this, keep it clean. We'll do this to the front, and we'll move around to the back side. And we will also spray the back and get that in there. And pay attention to try to get it down into the groove too, not just on the top, but also get it down in there. So those are the three main things to check and keep up with that maintenance. Right now, you would have this locked and tagged out. I'm showing you right now for illustration purposes, energized, so you can see the functionality of it. So you won't have to do this. You can, on yours, you would have it locked out and proper, so it would be in a safer situation. But right now, I needed to do this so I can show you that. So the component right here is you've got a variable drive frequency drive. That right there is 480 volts. That's what runs your grinding wheel. So as you're changing, you can kind of see that those numbers change on your potentiometer. So that's if you've got wheel problems, that is what drives that wheel. You have a 24 volt power supply in here. That's going to be running all your controls. It's all in this area. Your 480 volts that comes in off of the disconnect, if you can notice, it comes down to the L1 and L3 in a fuse block. That actually powers up your transformer and gives you your 120 volts. So that's a 480 volt to step down to 200 or 120 volt is what we use in here. So you have your main 120 volts right here, and then each of these circuit breakers are going to be running your servo packs. So these servo packs, you have 4 axes, and there'll be 4 of them. And these have different codes and things, but when they're steady, solid like this, that's what you want to see. As we go to this relay right here, this is actually your e-stop for your hand control. That's where that goes into. Now you see that contact right there. This is your main control relay. You can't, when you take your e-stop, reset it, and then you'll reset your e-stop up here, you'll see how that will close again. And you'll notice that your servo packs are blinking. So if I go ahead and hit continue, they'll go solid. And this is what we want to see. Up here on your controls, you have a 4-axis servo controller. It's a Galil. This is where the PLC is located. It gets its power from the 24-volt power supply. Right here is your input output. This is your breakup board. All this goes back into the Galil. So you have also, if you're going through this controller right here is going to be for your PLC HMI. That'll be your screen, and then your work light that's up on top. So the control components that control your wheel is a solid state relay. That is going to tell your wheel to start and stop. This right here is for your pump. So this one right there is for your coolant pump. And then going down and working from the MCR, this is your power supply fuse, and there's your cooling fan, which you can hear running right now. I gave you some spare fuses. You've got your bigger fuse for your 480 volt, and then you have your smaller glass fuses. So you have spares in there. And one of the things to note on this is this air filter right here is keeping everything clean. In a grinding room, it gets really dirty. There's a lot of coolant, a lot of stuff in there. To keep this cabinet nice and clean the way that it is, you take that off and put it in some soap, hot soapy water, and it'll clean that off. Once this gets crud in there and in coolant, it's almost like a black sticky film that'll get on there. This is removing that in the grinder room. Once it's full and it can't remove any more of that, it's gonna allow that to all pass through. It's gonna fill up your control box. So keep that clean. Look at that at least maybe once a month. Take this open and have it locked and tagged out. Open this and take a look at that. But you want to keep that clean. It's simple to clean. Just some mild detergent and hot water, and let that soak, and then put it back in.